School Committee at 6 p.m. tonight. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So you guys can all mute and stand if you choose and recite the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first matter on our agenda is the reorganization of the school committee. This is technically the first meeting of the new membership in the new season. So now that Stow's elections are complete. So we can open up nominations for election of our chair. And I'll call on Mike. Mike, I think you're muted.
I'm going to make a motion to nominate Leah Vivirito for the position of chair.
I will second that.
Okay. And any other nominations for chair? Hearing none, I will move forward with the roll. Myself, I vote yes. Joe?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Amy Vessels? Oh, I can't hear you. I'm going to come back to you, Amy. Mike?
Yes.
Amy Cohen?
Yes.
And I think I got everybody. Correct me if I'm wrong. Amy, can I hear you?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes. So how do you vote?
Yes.
All right. All right. Motion passes. And I graciously accept the nomination. And I thank you all for your support again. So I'm going to open up the floor for nominations for our vice chair position. Steve.
I would like to nominate Sharon Pock for vice chair.
All right. Do I have a second?
I would second the motion. Yeah, I would second the motion.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
And what other nominations do we have?
I would nominate Mr. Horesh.
Thanks, Joe. I will second that. Any other nominations for vice chair? All right, so hearing none, we will proceed in the order of nomination. And so we are voting for Sharon Pock for vice chair, and I'm going to go to Sharon first.
Can I ask a question before we vote?
Oh, of course, discussion.
So that was totally unexpected. And while I am honored by that, I would not like to vote on this. I would prefer to just allow Mike to have the nomination.
So perhaps, Sharon, would you like to, so I would like to, without objection, perhaps go to Mike's nomination first and do the roll call on that. If there's no objection, I'll do that. All right. So
just a point of order, my I'm a little bit confused. Is Ms. Pock withdrawing her name from nomination, or is she just deferring to the vote on Mr. Horesh first?
Which one would you rather, Sharon? Would you like to take your name out of the?
I will withdraw.
Withdraw. Okay. Thanks anyway, Steve. All right. So we have Mr. Horesh is nominated, our single nomination. And I would like to take the vote now. So Joe.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Amy Vessels.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Brett.
Yes.
Sharon.
Yes.
Amy Cohen.
Yes.
And Mike.
Yes.
Fantastic. So that motion passes. And I am also grateful that Mike is willing to do this work again. So thanks, Mike.
Thank you all. Thank you for your support.
So as you know, we need to now nominate a secretary. I think that the policy manual actually refers to this position as a clerk, but I think historically we've said secretary. So let's maintain that language for now. So nominations for secretary, Mike.
I'm going to move to nominate Mr. Joseph Gleason for the position of secretary.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Sharon.
I will gladly accept the nomination, Madam Chair.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Any other nominations for secretary? Hearing none, we can take the roll. I would like to vote first. I say yes. Steve?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Amy Vessels?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Amy Cohen?
Yes.
And Mike?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so I think that we have our reorganization done. So welcome to the next year, everybody. I'm excited. So as you guys can see, the next item on our agenda is to move into executive session. So I am going to read the motion, and Mike has just put it into the chat for you. So I move to go into executive session at 6:06 p.m. pursuant to Mass General Law C30A Section 21A2 to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Superintendent of schools. Based on my belief that having the discussion in open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school committee, executive session will include school committee and only the school committee. School committee will return to open session at the conclusion of executive session. And do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I think I saw Sharon first, so thanks, Sharon. And let's see, all in favor. Let's go to Joe first.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Steve?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Amy Vessels?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Brett? Amy? Cohen?
Yes.
Rich? Hi, Rich.
Yes.
Hi, Mike. Or rather, Mike.
Hi and yes.
All right, we're in executive session. So everybody who is not there are many people still in the waiting room, but I'll rely on Alita to let our friends in as she sees fit. We have no public comment tonight. So just bear with me as I get all my screens ready.
Didn't hear from you. It's a bad message.
All right. Lisa, I'm gonna, do you want me to mute? There's Alita. Hi, Alita. Fantastic. All right, guys. So as you know, we are coming out of executive session back into the public session, and we have a vote that we would like to take for the public's benefit. And that is around the superintendent's salary and the annual increase that we have decided upon. And so, Mike, do you feel like you can, or maybe Joe, Would you like to make the motion, considering you have a text?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I would move that we increase the superintendent's base salary by 4% or $7,400 for the next school year.
I will second that. Thanks, Joe. Is there anybody who would like to enter discussion into the public record? Anything that anybody would like to say there? Mike.
I think it's appropriate at this time to do just a little bit of in what the Jewish tradition calls kvelling, which is effusive praise and excessive bragging. There were some really great conversations in that executive session, and I certainly don't want to divulge what was said, but as a committee, we are all fully appreciative of how far this district has come in just 1 year under Superintendent Downing's leadership. I hope it's staying with the Jewish theme. I hope it's kosher to say that we all agree that we want Superintendent Downing to be here for many, many years while we are walking this fine line between managing money that comes from our town and from our neighbors. We also want to demonstrate how appreciative we are. And so this number that we landed on does walk a very fine line, a very tricky balance, but we are so appreciative in so many ways of all the things that have happened over just 1 year, and really do look forward to many more years of your leadership. We also want to demonstrate.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate that. Anybody else want to weigh in? Discussion, we will take the roll. I will vote first, and I vote yes. Joe?
Yes.
Amy Vessels?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Amy Cohen?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And Brett?
Yes.
All right, that's unanimous. So a big thank you to Kirk. I will vote first, and I vote yes. Joe?
Yes.
Amy Vessels?
Yes. Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Did you guys hear that? It's like an echo. Weird. Okay. So fantastic. Let's move on to our next item on the agenda, and that's the new Neshoba Regional High School EMT program presentation. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Kirk for a little introduction here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for those kind words. Let me see if I have my folks here. It does. And thank you, Mr. Horesh, for your kind words. I've come to love Neshoba very quickly, so looking forward to many years to come. Tonight, this is a long-awaited presentation for our Neshoba Regional High School EMT program. And so I'm actually going to turn it over to Dr. Boynton so she can have a moment to introduce our representatives that are here tonight. I know we have a couple of our students here this evening along with one of our leaders. So Dr. Boynton, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Downing. There's lots of folks on the call. So I am so impressed with our EMT students. They were some of the first students that Superintendent Downing and I met last summer. It was Heather and Matt who met with us with Ms. Hilliger and Margie and shared with us this wonderful EMT program. I learned about it as I was doing my research about Neshoba when I was applying for the principal position. And I just could not be prouder of our EMT students who are leaders in the building and leaders in the community. So I'm joined by Margot Sonia, Matt Alves, Neve Geyer, Heather Keene. Who am I missing? Screen 2. Am I missing anybody else? I'm kind of scanning to see who else is here. And if I didn't miss anybody, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our EMT cadet leaders. Oh, Margie's here too. There you are, Margie. And Margie is here as well.
All right. So, hi guys, my name is Matt. And we just came to talk to you guys about the cadet program. We wanted to do some awareness for the school committee and really just inform everyone about what we do at the high school and what we do for the community. So we can go to the next slide. Awesome. Quick precursor to this slide. So our program was actually founded because the town of Bolton was facing issues with staffing of the ambulance, and they were trying to find solutions to find people to work on the ambulance because they didn't want to have to shut the program down and shift to having a private EMS come in town and provide emergency medical services. So out of that came the idea to train the high school students to work on the ambulance and get them certified. Keep in mind at the time, the age of certification was 18, and many high school students aren't 18 years old. So we based the initial proposal to the town and to the school off of Darien, Connecticut's high school EMT program. Now they had it a little bit easier because their age of certification was 16 already, I believe. So they didn't have to face the state process to get a waiver. But in May of 1987, the town came to an agreement with the high school, and they funded the first class of cadet EMTs to work at to start learning at the high school, and the 10 classes after school. So the first class ran from 87 to 88, and the program went on to solve the issue of staffing for many years for the town of Bolton, while giving the students a great opportunity to learn hands-on and gain hands-on experience in a program that I believe only two in the state. So we can go to the next slide. So we finally got our state approval in 1988. So we started the class before we got our state approval to get certified at 16 and a half. So once the class ended, the cadets who had just finished went to the state house, and they pitched the whole program, and they were able to get a waiver for our program to run and get certification at 16 and a half, which allowed 2 certified cadets to staff the ambulance to count as 1 EMT basic under the eyes of the state. So the cadets basically, if they're certified EMT cadets, they can do anything that an EMT basic can do in the state protocols other than drive the car. So how we did it, we got to the scene by intercepting from the high school during school hours using the EMS cadet car. Today we use you can see the picture of it in the first slide. It was an old police car, Ford Explorer, but it started with the superintendent driving, which kind of went a little bit full circle because now we currently have our dean driving because we're having issues with finding a driver for the car. So afterward, the custodians took over as drivers, and sadly that ended because of issues that we're not here to talk about today. And we're trying to figure out what we can do as a program to find drivers for the cadet car, because Mr. Biggs is going to return to being a teacher next year, and he's not going to be able to drive the cadet car. So if we don't have a driver at the school, then we're not going to be able to respond to calls, which is very unfortunate. And I'm going to pass it off to our next cadet. Thank you, guys.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren. So I'm just here to talk about kind of how we set up the program and how we run it. And so essentially we split the program into 3 years of participation. So the first year we have to apply, and if we get accepted, then we are placed into a class, which is nationally and state approved. And after we complete that class and we pass it, then the cadets have the ability to take the national and state exams to become certified EMTs at 16 and a half. It's the same exams as the adults take. And again, like Matt said, the only real difference is we are not there for staffing purposes and we can't drive until we turn 18. So the next part is the year 2 class, which is very similar to the year 3 class. And during that, we take weekly continuing education courses, which satisfies the NCCR guidelines, which keeps up our certification as EMTs. And we respond from the high school in the cadet car to any call in Bolton. And then the year 3 class, same thing. We take the class, the weekly class with the year 2s. And the only difference is that we have the opportunity to get into a leadership position called a crew chief. And that just allows you to kind of have somebody to really be step up and help everybody kind of find their way on the calls, especially the younger year 2s who are just starting on call. And we respond from the high school when a pager goes off. We carry those during the day from 7 to 2. And when those go off, we just get up and we leave class and we listen to make sure that it's in Bolton. And then if it is, we run up to the car and we get on the radio to key into dispatch to let them know that we're on the way to the scene. And we also carry IAR, which is on our phones, and that just lets us know when there is a call in Bolton. And sometimes it'll come through if there's a mutual aid call or something like that, but we only go to calls in Bolton. So this past year, we ran with crews of 2 people, 1 crew chief and another cadet, which was a year 3 for most of the year. But the end, we switched it up a little bit, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we can go to the next slide. So as many of you may know, we lost our waiver in December of 2020, which has been reinstated, which is awesome. But before that was approved, the current year 1 cadets, they couldn't take the EMT course. They took an EMR class. So once they completed that and our waiver was reinstated, they are now taking an EMR to an EMT bridge class, which is awesome. So they'll get certified relatively soon. And in the meantime, since they passed their EMR class, they have been able to come on calls with us, which the chief approved, and that has been great. So it was about a month ago that we switched to having crews of 2 with a crew chief and a year 3. And now we are a crew chief and 2 year 1s. So we can get them as much experience as possible and keep the program going essentially. And another thing is, like Matt said, our driver, Mr. Biggs, who has been awesome this year, he's becoming a teacher next year, so he can't leave classes to come drive us. And it's just not possible for us to be on call at the school if we don't have a driver. So that's a huge issue, and that definitely needs to be solved as soon as possible. So I can pass it off to the next cadet now.
Hi guys, I'm Heather. So I wanted to talk about our scope of practice. So as cadets, our scope of practice is that of an EMT basic, which basically means we can do the same medical interventions and all the same stuff as a normal Massachusetts EMT. We also took the same course and the same test as every other EMT in Massachusetts. The only difference between us and EMTs above the age of 18 is that we don't count towards staffing the ambulance. So there needs to be an EMT above 18 or a paramedic in the back of the ambulance, because OEMS doesn't count us towards the minimum staffing of 1 person in the back of the ambulance. We also are certified in some extra things, medical interventions, such as iGel, check and inject, albuterol, and glucagon, which basically means that the Bolton department opted in for these medical interventions, and the cadets have all been trained in it, just as every other EMT in the department has. And then we also have been trained to assist paramedics And we have been able to work alongside the paramedics in the department very, very well. So I can pass it on to the next person.
Hi, everyone. I'm Margot. Can you hear me? Okay. My mic might be a little funky, but just to summarize, there's a bullet point in the middle here for the paramedics that you couldn't ignore, but we're just super eager to continue being a part of Bolton Fire. Many of us are actually going on to work with Bolton Fire. I personally am going on to work with Lancaster Fire, which is actually really great, especially in this time when EMS staffing and first responder staffing overall is super low. To have young people ready to go in to the service right out of high school is super important. We're also excited to just keep passing this program on. It's so essential to young people who are looking at medicine, or not even those who are looking at medicine, but just looking to be able to take leadership roles in their future, do stuff of high intensity. It's a high rigor course, so they're learning how to study hard for stuff they're passionate about. So overall, just a really great program to have for high school students, and it's something we can even look at as a model for other career paths. We have had so many cadets go into the medical field. I think like half of our class this year is planning on going to either nursing or med school, which is kind of cool. Or probably more than half, but yeah. So at this time, I'd like to take any questions that anyone might have. I know we kind of just went through like a ton of little details about the program. So you can either put them in the chat or just unmute and ask, and I'd be happy to answer.
I think I see Mike's hand. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, well, first, I just want to thank the 4 cadets, Matt, Lauren, Heather, and Margot, for that presentation. That was seriously awesome. And, one thing I just want to add is that you're old when a picture from Neshoba about the origins of the EMT program is presented in sepia tones. I thought I was looking at like Tombstone, Arizona, 1887. It was actually Bolton, Massachusetts, 1987. So thank you for that. That makes me feel good. I guess my question is, my son has expressed, he's in 6th grade, he's expressed some interest in the EMT program because my kid's babysitter is part of the program and she loves it. So are there ways to get younger kids, maybe at the middle school levels, kind of interested and a little bit more knowledgeable about the program so that when they hit the high school, they're a little bit more kind of prepared for that process?
Yeah, I love that idea. And definitely, I think kind of it's a word of mouth thing lately, is just like, oh, my friend does this. And I think it's super cool. I know a lot of us have done little presentations in different areas. We did one at like Sterling Gym at some camps. But I think especially targeting Neshoba, the district, and reaching out to those underclassmen is cool. And yeah, definitely something that we can look at going forward. I'm not sure how much of that we've done in the past with the middle schools, especially. Yeah, I'll pass it to Matt because he probably has more on that.
So we actually worked on making a video for each year. There's a video for the incoming freshmen at Neshoba. And we had a little section in the video, and we basically ran everyone through the cadet car and talked about what we do, kind of just to get people interested so that they can apply to the program, because you can't necessarily apply your freshman year directly. You have to wait until you're a sophomore so that you can be old enough by the time you finish the course to certify. So we do that, I believe, in the beginning of freshman year, because it's really the earliest you can really get like involved and start getting ready for it. But I mean, I know that we'd love to do presentations at the middle schools or anything like that, just to kind of boost the awareness for the program and get more people into it, because it really is amazing.
Yeah, and I think another important aspect of the program is it's probably the first like official interview and like application process I ever did, and for something that I was like really, really excited for too, which is really cool to get kids involved in young.
That's great. Lisa.
I just want to add, it was probably 3.5 years ago, we actually did a program with the high school EMT program and had them go into some of the middle schools and do CPR, hands only or hands off training, which was really beneficial. And it was kind of a little bit of an introduction as well. And clearly because of the pandemic, we were unable to do that, but something we're looking forward to bringing back again. So definitely bring in the middle school into that program pre-learning.
Yeah.
Reminder.
Something we didn't include in the slideshow is that we do a CPR marathon every year or every other year, and it's a fundraiser for our cadet scholarship that goes to 1 or 2 seniors every year. And so we pretty much just do CPR for 24 hours straight, and we try to like advertise that a lot. And yeah, when they did CPR in schools, it was also really cool.
I'm going to ask Amy to go next. Go ahead, Amy.
Thanks. I just wanted to give a big shout out to these 4 students, not only for the presentation, but just for the dedication that they've shown through, throughout COVID, sticking with it. It's been a rough past few years. And so I just wanted to say that, we appreciate your perseverance and your dedication and coming here to speak tonight to fill us in on what you've been doing and serving as role models for the younger students, because this program has such a great reputation. It really does wonderful things for Neshoba students, prepares them for careers beyond here, beyond college even. And so I just want to make sure I express my gratitude to all of you. My daughter is in this program. I can tell you that it takes a lot of time and dedication, and that interview process is a great, even if you don't make it into the program, just going through that is a great first real world experience. I do have one question though. There's another thing I don't think you mentioned, and that is a trip to Malawi, I think it was. Heather, would you be able to speak to that? I think you were, I don't know how you were lucky enough to go. Maybe you could fill us in on that.
Yeah, so actually that trip isn't just for the Neshoba EMT Cadet Program, but I think just because I personally, my family knows Dr. Liss, who runs the trip through the Lions Club. And so I reached out to the other cadets and mentioned the trip to Malawi, and I told them about how it's really good medical opportunities and it's just a great way to experience another culture and do some volunteer work and make a difference. And so I think that's why pretty much all of the people who went on the trip this year were EMTs. But yeah, that was definitely an amazing experience, and I would go again any day. I know Margot and Matt also went.
That's fantastic. So impressive, guys. Any other questions for the cadets or comments? Maybe to Rich, and then we'll go over to Dr. Boyan.
Just briefly, I know there's a lot of adults that work with this program too. I know this is all about the kids and you guys did a great job, but I know there's a lot of dedicated people that have been helping this program come along. So cheers to them. I know they're not on the call today, but I'm sure they're watching. So you're
Thanks,
recognized.
A couple of them are. Shout out to Margie and Mrs. Hilger. And obviously Dr. Boynton has been a very large part of it as well.
And the town administrators as well. We have a lot of people to thank because we had to pull quite a few strings throughout the past few years to keep the ball rolling, and just the support has been unmatched. We're very thankful.
Go ahead, Dr. Boynton.
Thank you. I would be remiss if we didn't also thank Fire Chief as well as Representative Hogan. And I was not part of those conversations, but she worked some magic really behind the scenes, really advocating. And I think Superintendent Downing was a part of those conversations at a very high level. And I want to speak to the driver issue and question. So as you know, Mr. Biggs is stepping into a classroom teacher role, and we're actually currently interviewing for the dean position. I'm actually including that as a part of the job description. So I'm sharing that our current dean has served in this capacity this year, and it's worked well. And so this would likely be part of the dean position during the school day moving forward. So that's been part of the interview process, and people seem pretty excited about it.
That is great news.
That is great news. That was actually my only real question. So fantastic to hear. So over to you, Superintendent Downing.
Yeah, that is great. And you know, I'm harking back to my very first conversation with Matt and Heather last summer. And we were talking about what are some assured ways that we could build that into the future. So thank you, Dr. Boyton, for doing that. I want to celebrate our students and celebrate this program as well. We're so lucky that it's also on the same night that we're going to hear our architect presentation on the high school building project, because as they know, the EMT model is a model that we've been discussing for the future of our building project in thinking about the learning pathways and programs and other areas that we want to look at for certification and licensure levels. And so this program has served as a model and an example for that I know our architects are taking from as we're in our educational visioning conversation. So the impact you all have goes beyond just the people that you help and the skills that you're developing. It's now transferring into other areas where we can replicate that degree of excellence for other students and other areas of interest. So well done, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys, for being here with us to celebrate this program. We're so proud of you. Great job.
Thank you guys so much for having us.
Thank you
so much. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. So we're going to move on to our next item on the agenda, and that is a presentation from our design team, Kaestle Booz and Skanska. And so Superintendent Downing, perhaps you would like, or even Mr. Gleason, you could cue this up for us.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have with us tonight three very important individuals to this build project. First and foremost among them is Ms. Mary Ann Williams, who represents our OPM Skanska. Along with Ms. Williams this evening, we have another individual who's proven to be very invaluable to this project, and I've deemed her our construction concierge, Ms. Sin Nguyen. She's been exceedingly helpful to me in my role as chair of the building committee. In addition to that, we also have our lead architect from Kaestle Booz Associates, Mr. Craig Olson. So these are the three individuals who are spearheading along with Superintendent Downing. And perhaps I appreciate, Madam Chair, you giving me the opportunity to introduce these three individuals. But you know, as important as Ms. Williams, Ms. Nguyen, and Mr. Olson are, to that triumvirate, we have to add Superintendent Downing. The four of them have done yeoman's work to move this project to where it is this evening. So without further ado, I will turn it over to, I'll let Mr. Superintendent Downing determine who's going to be speaking first.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason. I appreciate the kind comments as well. I think I will turn it over now to our project manager, Ms. Mary Ann Williams, to introduce the team and to begin the presentation. So Mary Ann, do you want to begin introductions?
Yes, I do. Thank you. We also have a couple of more folks joining us who are also key members of the team that I would be remiss if we didn't introduce them as well. And that's Joe Milani. He is a project architect with Kaestle Booz, and Kate Jessup, who is also an educational planner. So not to steal anybody's thunder, I'm going to let Craig proceed with the presentation. Craig, you're muted.
How's that? Is that better?
Much better.
Technology doesn't know what device to use when it's with this stuff. So, so thank you. Superintendent Downing and Chairperson of the School Building Committee, Mr. Gleason. We wanted to recognize the School Building Committee tonight, and all the people that are as a volunteer board are helping work with us through this whole process. A few that are members of the school committee and have been part of the process, but so we want to make sure that we recognize all the members that have been along the way since we as an architect and as the owner's project manager have been on board for about 6 months now. But there was a lot of work that by the district that got us to this point, even us joining the team. I will turn it over to Mary Ann real quickly if she wants to just introduce Skanska as a firm to the people.
Now I have to unmute myself as well. So Skanska is a very large, diversified company. We work in the consulting group, which provides owners project management services. I'm not going to go down all the bullets here, but we are a large group of probably almost 50 consultants in this smaller specialty group. And we all come from different backgrounds, whether it's design, construction, engineering, et cetera. And we have the opportunity to be a liaison between the district, the design team, and the MSBA. So I'm very pleased to be here with our team. This is a very exciting project. Some of you folks might be more familiar with our work with the Minuteman Regional Vocational Technical High School, Attleboro High School, Taconic, et cetera. So that's our focus, full-time, working on schools, and I'll turn it back over to Craig.
Thank you, Mary Ann. And Caestle Booz Associates, we're a leader in New England in school design. Our focus is both public safety facilities and K-12 schools. We have one of the largest experience in New England because of our history, as well as just our been fortunate to be successful as a firm. And as Mary Ann just mentioned, Minuteman Regional Votech is just down the street from you. But we've also had the privilege to partner with your OPM Skanska on Attleboro High School, which is just finishing up construction. But what we're here to talk is just give an update to the school committee of where we are with the project, and just as an update in general. So at the end of June, we'll be submitting our first package to the Mass School Building Authority, the MSBA, which is the first phase of the feasibility study. It's titled the Preliminary Design Program. And in this phase is where it's about evaluating the existing conditions, educational visioning. So these are all elements that you see in front of you on the slide now that are included in the feasibility study and the preliminary design program. Ultimately, their goal in this evaluation is to find the most fiscally responsible and educationally appropriate long-term solution for the district. So through that, there is as you can see, there's a large evaluation of the existing conditions that cover the full spectrum. We presented our evaluations both to the school building committee and in public forums, allowing the public for an ability to ask questions and solicit any information that we can provide them along the way, as well as we're working through the process of educational programming, which includes educational visioning, and that's a little bit more we're going to talk about tonight. But back in February, we conducted a 3-day summit, which involved many people throughout the district from all walks of life, students, parents, teachers, and it covered a broad spectrum, but it was really the focus were the items that you see in front of you here. And what I can say from that is it was truly an enjoyable experience as a person that has been through this many times with many different districts. The students you have in your district, I can't say it, and I say it every time we talk about it, I can't say it enough, is how thoughtful, how just in depth and how diverse of thinkers they were as we were going through this, that they brought so much to the table and thoughts that even as professionals, we had to stop and think about because they challenged us with the way that they were thinking. So we want to say that because it was so powerful in working with them. And again, these were all people that came on their own free will as part of this and joined us, where, like, as I mentioned, you had members of administration, educators, students, parents, and community leaders from all throughout the district to help lend and have these discussions through the educational visioning. This was about us thinking about what education is currently at Neshoba, what works, what doesn't, and what could it be. And as we look to try to find a solution for a long-term solution for 50 years and beyond. So as a result of that, we have many different items that come up, and it led to a whole school concept, where it's more about, this is purely a bubble diagram that was a result of all of those talking about key elements that people felt were important to the building. The discussions weren't so much about the building, but what should happen in the building, and then that helps guide us to how to design the building to support what actually functions inside. So the overall concept was again this central focus, central atrium area that then everything connected into and with small learning communities. I know that there's a lot to talk about that, and I could talk to you about it all night long, but I want to be sensitive to everybody's time. But we've discussed these at public forums, and we'll continue to discuss these with people if they do have any questions, and we can take any at the end of this presentation as well. But from that initial visioning, we've continually weekly had meetings with an educational leadership team and continue to define what that actually means, each week focusing on a different aspect of the building to make sure that we captured. Again, as we're looking at this, it's important to note that we're not talking about a building yet, although we're more talking about spaces, what type of spaces should be in the building and how should they be arranged, what are their adjacencies, and how can they work in cohesion. And it's not just about, a key element that we've talked about is it's not just about a secular space, but how they all come together, but also how they extend beyond the building and out to nature. And so that's something that was always important as we've gone through this, as we focus on the health and wellness of students. And again, some of these diagrams are just showing the progress that we've taken as far as looking at the organization of the building. And all of this comes together as while we talk about these bubble diagrams and the organization of the building, we still have a certain amount of spaces that are needed for education. And that the basis of that is organized around the MSBA Space Summary Guidelines, which are the MSBA being the Mass School Building Authority. They've created a space summary guidelines that are based on national standards of what size a high school classroom should be, what size a special ed classroom should be, what size an art classroom should be, as well as how many should be based on a population. Now, the proposed enrollment for the project is 925 students. And the way that they arrive at these, as I mentioned, is based on an 85% utilization rate, which means that they're looking to have a space used 85% of the time during the school day. And that is based on a national standard. So what this allows us is to maximize utilization of the building so that we're not overbuilding, but we're also not underbuilding. And what that does allow is for fluctuations in enrollment and to encompass that as a whole. So what you're seeing here is a very simplified version of that spreadsheet. It's much more complex than this, but we just simplified it down for what we see for talking points. But what we do want to know is when we look at the space summary guidelines in comparison to your existing school, which we show your existing school is the left category, and then the space summary guidelines on the right. And what you'll note is we picked the average size for your classroom. Your average classroom is about 686 square feet. And the average, national average for a current classroom is 850 square feet. Another example is that your current gym, although you have 2 gyms, they're both undersized based on a current standard. And another key element is your auditorium, is again, both the stage and the auditorium, based on your enrollment, are undersized. Now, I say that and I highlight, especially when you talk about classrooms, is that's a significant amount of square footage when you think about a single room. And then you multiply that, for instance, times 32 classrooms. But then when you go to the very bottom right of this slide, you'll see when we're looking to the right is based on the space summary guidelines and using a standard grossing factor, which takes into account wall, circulation, etc. A typical new building would be around 185,000 square feet. But when we look at your current building, you're at about 200,000, a little over 200,000 square feet. So what that tells us is your actual program spaces, the usable spaces in your school are very undersized, but your building is oversized and very poorly utilized in a sense of there's a lot of wasted space. And that's because of the sprawl, because of the additions added on. And that's really the nature of the beast when you do additions and you add on. And so you have a lot of inefficient space. And when it comes to inefficient space, that's space you have to maintain, which is cost to heat, cool, all those things that we take into consider as we're looking at a building as a whole. So that's just something that when we evaluate your existing versus your new, versus what would be a new as we're developing your program. Another thing that we've been going through the process with is the site selection evaluation process. And that is focusing on just making sure throughout this whole feasibility study that we look beyond just your current school site. And so in working with the district, the working group, and the school building committee, we developed an evaluation process, developing required criteria, and then identifying the sites that meet that criteria, and then developing a site evaluation matrix to review against the sites to find out what is the optimal site for the school project. Through this, we established these 3 required criteria. First being a minimum of 45 acres of buildable land, and that is based on the size required for a school building, the athletic fields, and the associated site amenities. The second thing was a requirement was that it needs to meet the requirements of the school district agreement, which in the agreement states that the regional district serving students from all districts, towns shall be located as near as feasible to the geographic and population centers of the district. And third was a priority for district-owned property, because cost for the purchase of property that is not already owned is a non-reimbursable expense from the MSBA. And second to that is you would actually have to purchase the property before you would be able to proceed with a project. So why that's important is it was decision to select a property that was going to be procured outside through the project, that the project would have to stop until that whole process went through the procurement of it. And then if the project does not proceed, then the district has still expended that money for property that may not be usable in the long term. So that's why that was established as a required criteria. So what we did from there is we looked at the district as a whole, and we looked and identified all the properties within the district, the 3 towns that meet that 45 acres. As well as looked at what are privately owned parcels, what are town-owned staying, as well as the existing school site. And so that's what you're seeing in this diagram here. And then as we looked at criteria number 2, how do we meet the requirements of the district? Because it wasn't a very distinct way it placed it. It just said geographic population centers of the district. For our purposes, we established it as within a 3-mile radius, which captures more of the geographic center of the district, as well as near Route 117, because as you know, everything goes through 117 to go through the district. So that place it really as the population centers. So, but in doing that, we are able to narrow down to the properties that you see here, and really down to the 5 that we have highlighted here. And finally, when we look at what is actually owned by the district, the existing high school site is the only site that is district owned. And through that, it really, through that criteria, the existing high school site rose to the top as being the most fiscally responsible solution as a place in the building. And so when we looked at that, we then still developed this, wanted to evaluate the existing high school site against the site selection matrix that was established to confirm that the existing high school site could still meet the requirements that are set forth to that, and which we did, and we were able to confirm that the building, the site can support a new project, whether it's addition or renovation project on the existing site or new construction, and there isn't a large impact to the project by doing that. So it was ultimately determined that the best solution was to further explore placing addition and renovation, as well as new construction on the existing high school site. And that leads to the final part of the preliminary design program that we're working on currently, is the preliminary evaluation of options. Through the process, we're required to do at least 3 options, which we have already developed many more than that. But they're in a basis, what we call the base repair or code upgrade option, the addition renovation, and then the new construction. Option 1 is purely just what it will take to bring the building up to current code standards, repair everything that the building is in need of. And that is kind of creates our baseline, so we know what it costs just to fix the building. That the MSBA has identified that there is a need, that the building it's an aged building, it's been well maintained by the district, but it is an old tired building, and there are issues that need to be addressed. And so that's what that option is. That option doesn't include any MSBA reimbursement, and it doesn't meet the educational program. It's purely just fixing the building. Option 2 is taking option 1, but then modifying the building, doing addition or renovations as necessary to make sure that the building will meet the educational program. And then finally, option 3 is exploring a new building that meets the educational program. And through those, we'll be able to understand, based on reimbursement rate, what the district share is. Well, again, as we look to define what the most fiscally responsible, educationally appropriate solution is for the building, where we don't know at this point, because we're still evaluating it all, whether addition renovation is the right solution or whether new construction is the right solution. All that will come out as we develop over even the next 6 months and evaluate those more. So even as we've gone through, I'm going to kind of fly through this, but for instance, the base repair, really the only pro to base repair is you're fixing your facility issues. There's many cons to it as far as construction timeline, reimbursables from the MSBA, meeting the education program, as well as be significantly disruptive to the kids during school, because there'll be work ongoing in the school while the kids are in school. Some of the similar stuff could occur in an addition renovation option, but so there's things that are positive and there's things that are negative to it. And again, the numbers will tell us more once we evaluate that. And then again, when we look at even at new construction, what we've done so far is just look at where we could place a building that's appropriately sized, as I mentioned, around the 185,000 square feet, plus or minus, throughout the site. And that's what this exercise is. And so we're starting to evaluate that and what the cost implications are of putting a building in option 3A or 3B or 3C. And so that's what we're really looking at exploring, what those options are and what the cost implications are, because that'll help inform the school building committee to make an educated decision as we're moving forward. And finally, just as an update to the committee, is we do have our third public forum coming up on June 14th in the auditorium, which will be reviewing a lot of what we reviewed tonight, as well as site selection and some of our further development of the building options, as well as then our school building committee on June 21st, which will be reviewing the submission that we'll be making to the MSBA and requesting approval to submit. Ultimately, we'll be continuing on after that, and we'll be coming back to the school committee throughout the process to keep you informed. And so we invite everybody to attend the public forum if you're available, and would be happy to discuss and take any questions from you at this point.
Thanks so much, Craig. That was great. Very informative. So I'd love to see if there are any questions from the committee. Joe.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Olson, I'm going to ask you to do me a small favor. Make my job a little bit easier later on in the agenda when I am required to give a report in regards to the ongoings of the school building committee. June 21st, we're going to be meeting and voting on the preliminary design program submission for the MSBA. And I was wondering if you could just break that down like a fraction and explain it to us like we're all 5-year-olds, exactly what that submission to the MSBA entails.
Yep, well, I'll actually go back to a slide as my cheat sheet. And what it will include at this point is it's the preliminary design program is purely about the investigations of the existing and starting to explore what potential exists. So it'll include almost there. The evaluation of the existing conditions, which includes a site assessment, historical analysis, building code, architectural, all of the systems of the building, hazardous materials, traffic. We've left almost literally, even when it comes to soils, no stone unturned in the evaluation of the project, to make sure that we understand what the implications are of what it would cost to address the current building, but also planning ahead for an ad reno or a new construction, as well as then conducting the educational visioning, as well as the development of the items that we talked about tonight, the space summary and how many classrooms, what size they will be, how the building is roughly going to be organized, and the development of those early preliminary options. So for all intents and purposes, what we talked about tonight is what's going to be included in that package, in much more detail, a lot more words, a lot more pictures. And that document will be shared as a PDF, so it can be shared digitally with our investigations and what we found from it. And that is just part one of the feasibility study, as I mentioned. Part two, which will be submitted in October, is the preferred schematic report. And in that is taking the investigations that have been done as part of the PDP, the preliminary design program, and reviewing those building options and developing them further, and developing multiple different options, including cost estimates to those, so that at the end of the preferred schematic phase, the district and the school building committee will be looking at selecting what a preferred solution would be to explore further into design phase. And it's at that point that the decision would be made to whether to look at new construction, addition, renovation. And again, the intent of that is to find what the most fiscally responsible and educationally appropriate solution is. So that can mean a lot of things. And so it's a very loaded statement, which hasn't been determined yet, in all fairness to the building committee and everybody, because we're in that investigation period. What is that? And that's why we're doing what we're doing, is to find out what the answer is to that. So we can't really make a statement either way of what direction the project is really going in. We'll know that more after June, as we get into September, in that timeline when we're really in the meat of it. We have cost estimates, so we can really answer what is the most fiscally responsible solution for the district.
And Joe, thanks, Craig. Joe, to follow up on that, we will have this on our school committee agenda on the 22nd of June to approve whatever the school building committee has suggested we approve, correct?
Yeah, we've decided that we're going to, there'll be a recommendation from the SBC on the 21st to the full committee, and it will be the will of the committee at that point to either endorse or not endorse the recommendation of our building committee.
Thanks, Joe. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, kind of like the movie The Graduate. I have one word, and that's security. Does that fall under technical, or?
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did do a safety and security assessment of your existing school. That's something that is unfortunately is part of every discussion regularly because of even recent events. We have a consultant that specializes specifically in that as part of our team, that they as a member, so they are working with us. We, as I mentioned briefly at the beginning, Kaestle Booz, not only do we specialize in K-12 facilities, but we also specialize in public safety facilities. So that gives us unique ability and understanding of how it works on both ends, because that is a very important element. And it is a very fair statement to say that even with the reality is safety and security is still falls under the category of educationally appropriate. And so that's not something that can be taken lightly, and it's a priority of ours that we look at both active security as well as passive security when it comes to the way the building is designed and those kinds of measures.
Yeah, and Craig, if I could just add one thing on that. So if you saw on one of the slides Craig presented, I've been meeting weekly with an educational leadership group, and we have had discussions on how that sort of internal security happens, the idea of having adults and presence and students present together for not only the social emotional health of the students, but also providing that passive security in a lot of situations. So ultimately, yes, there would be sort of hard security features of the building, but it is something that we are addressing in these early on discussions that really are sort of the in-between visioning and programming, which is where I live as the educational programmer, is how do we understand, your programs, just like we heard about the EMT program. We've had a lot of discussions on what that means for space in the new facility or renovated facility, and what that would mean and how we provide that safety, how we provide access for those types of things. So not only is safety and security part of the physical plant, and that's an important piece, but we layer on how it is part of the educational program as well.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Amy.
Sorry, I could not get to my mute button. I wanted to just mention that the superintendent has graciously agreed to live stream the next public forum. And because in recognition of how busy everybody's going to be, the families, especially, who are part of the target audience. Were you trying to get to the slide that showed the date? Is that what?
Yeah, okay. I over scrolled.
No problem. I think it's Tuesday, June 14th. Is that right?
Yes.
I know personally, I have a conflict that night with a band or chorus concert. So the idea is that if we live stream it, people can tune in if it's possible. And once I get some more details on how that will work, we'll add it to the flyer and distribute it around so that people can just watch it in real time.
Craig or Amy or Joe, Kirk, is it also possible for the school building committee to keep that question survey open so that our designers could address questions that have been posed by members of the community who could not attend?
Ms. Vivirito, I can answer that question. We actually, yes, we can. We can definitely keep that open. Using the StreamYard platform, we have the ability to receive comments from the community live as they're watching the presentations. Dr. Boynton has graciously offered to monitor the chat line of the StreamYard. So she will be near a microphone and we'll offer up questions that come out from the community that are viewing it via StreamYard.
Very sophisticated. Thank you. So many solutions there. Okay, Amy, is that an old gold hand? Okay, that's old. Any other questions for our design team after this very comprehensive presentation?
Actually, I have one more, Leah.
Yeah.
For the benefit of the public, I was wondering if this presentation would be posted as a meeting material. Because I know that we have been given the presentation that the school building committee received, but I'm not sure that we have this one. And I know people are going to have a lot of questions and curiosity around this. So.
Yeah, so we could get that to Alita to get it posted. That would be fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Craig, you can send it to any of us.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. So I think that brings us to a conclusion there. So thank you to Kaestle Booze. Thank you to Skanska and everybody else who came to visit us to discuss. Thank you to Joe for leading this effort and to Kirk for all your good work. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our next agenda item, and that is the consent agenda. And Mike, I turn to you.
All right, I'll move to approve the consent agenda of June 1st, 2022, containing the meeting minutes of May 18th, 2022, and the warrants of June 3rd, 2022.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Steve. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll go to the roll. I vote yes. Joe?
Yes.
Amy V?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Amy C?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda is unanimous. Our next item on the agenda is our superintendent's update. And so again, I'll turn it over to you, Kirk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. And I will go through some basic announcements and the superintendent's update in here. And there is a procedural vote that I am asking for tonight regarding the calendar, and we'll discuss that when we get there. First thing is we figured out our solution for in-person school meeting updates. We're going to be using the OWL video conference device to assist with any members that for reasons that are determined need to work in the meeting remotely can do so and interact with the committee via this OWL device. So we'll be ready to do that. The remote order that allows public meetings to be held remotely lasts until July 15th, not June 15th. So it lasts until July 15th. So this setup will be ready to go for the next school year in the fall. So thank you to Mr. Su Chi and for Rob Frieswick for finding some solutions for us to handle that. The next piece is the Assabet Valley Collaborative Update. I provided for you the FY23 ABC tuition services and transportation rates. This is just an information only as a member district. And as I had learned and shared with you at the last meeting, there are 4 updates to give regarding ABC throughout the year. So these will be sprinkled next year as opposed to doing 3 consecutive meetings with these updates currently. But I encourage you to look at that. Currently, we only have a couple of students that are accessing instructional services through ABC, but they are definitely on our menu of opportunities for when we have learning profiles that match up with the services they provide. Next is Juneteenth compensation. To inform for the committee that we're in a wonky calendar this year, as the last day of school of the calendar was prior to Juneteenth, which is a federal holiday where schools are closed. And with our 2 snow days, we're now after Juneteenth. And so it is a federal holiday, so all federal buildings will be closed, including our schools. And so the financial impact to that is that for those 12-month employees, it is simply in terms of your work time, your service. So you can think of it as a compensation for a day the way other federal holidays like Labor Day and Memorial Day. For our 10-month folks, because the way their calendar is written, with the chair, we entered into an MOU for those Unit C employees to be paid in the same way that they would those other federal holidays, paid federal holidays. And that'll be included in the next negotiated agreement, as their previous negotiated agreement was prior to this being designated a federal holiday. The total impact to the district of that is $12,600. Ms. Maroney has done a fine job of keeping me updated on the books. And so financially, with some salary savings that we've experienced this year, we were able to cover that cost. The next two items are both regarding the calendar. The first one is very straightforward. So I'm hoping for a vote on this tonight so we can get proper notifications to our community. And that is what I've been signaling in my weekly updates, is that after we voted our calendar, I think that was February 9th, if I recall, February 9th, the state later determined that is a state election primary day. And so in working with our towns to ensure that our voters have ease of voting on that day, the day after Labor Day was determined to be the voting day. And so I'm recommending that we have Tuesday, September 6th be a day of no school and for voting. So 12-month employees would still be working on that day. And for our Unit A and Unit C 10-month employees, their contracts are determined by day, so there's no fiscal impact to it at all. But it does extend the last day of school out by one more day. So the last day of school would be June 16th in that case. So after the report, I'm going to ask if anyone is willing to take that motion up to adapt the calendar by that date. The next item regarding the calendar is based upon how we recognize and demonstrate our values in our school calendar by mentioning the holidays for which we do not have school. So I've done a little research on this for the committee to digest, and I'm not asking for any votes or recommendations to this. I'm not even sure the content of our actual calendar is in the purview of the committee, to tell you the truth. I do know that you set the days for school, but in terms of what is on the information that's provided on the calendar, that's typically the school district that does that. But for your digestion, I've done some research around the federal holidays and how they're recognized. And so in the my report, you can see I've listed the federal holidays that fall during the school year when we're in session. So you'll notice, like, for instance, Independence Day is not listed here because we're not in session during the summer holidays, summer vacations. So what you'll find about this list is that these items, particularly I'll point to October 10th, Columbus Day, these are federal holidays recognized by acts of Congress, determining that they are federal holidays. Last fall, Indigenous Peoples Day was an executive order by the president that fell on the same day as Columbus Day. But I want to be just clear with you all in the community that it is not federally recognized as Indigenous Peoples Day by an act of Congress. That was through executive order. The other piece that I would like to point out to you is that of all these holidays, Christmas comes up as an official federal holiday and is a religious holiday represented amongst these other holidays. But federal buildings are closed on Christmas Day, and through an act of Congress, it was named as that. So as I talked about, the Dear Jay recommendation suggests that the school system's value be expressed in the calendar. And that point, I agree. And so making a simple distinction, while we post them as the federal holidays, there are some cultural items that we need to address. And I think Christmas being recognized as the only religious holiday that would be labeled in such a way, when we have people of multiple faiths in our community that are of Hebrew faith, that are of Muslim faith, that are of Hindu faith, that if we are to look at that and recognize it fairly, my recommendation, let me also add that in terms of Indigenous Peoples Day, recognizing and honoring the Indigenous people and those who are Indigenous to the lands in which our schools reside, I think it's most appropriate to honor them as well. And so what I'm suggesting for your digestion and recommending is that we look at these calendars, list them as they are listed as federal holidays, with October 10th sharing as Indigenous Peoples Day, but then recognizing Christmas in the list of holidays that is actually already on our calendar now. So the balance is in that section of the calendar as it currently exists. To that end, I also think that next year, working in conjunction with DRJ, that we also consult with and work with our local faith leaders to make some decisions about what are the holidays that would be most appropriate. Because the purpose of listing holidays on our calendar is to also list it with our policy of assuring that students don't experience any type of penalty for celebrating a holiday or missing school or missing work, and be afforded fair opportunities to make up work, retake tests, retake quizzes in the event they fell on some holidays. And we try very much to avoid doing such things. So they're listed on the calendar to remind people we're going to work with folks in their faith traditions in order to provide our education and make sure families have a chance to honor those faith traditions without missing assignments in school. So that's where the complexity and nuances of that come into play. So I would like to work with DRJ next year, and perhaps Ms. Poch can guide me in that way, and we could reach out to some of our local faith leaders to give us some guidance, because we can't have a list that is 20 pages long in holidays, because then it becomes a document that's not digestible, readable, accessible, purposeful. And I know some school systems that have done that have since retracted it because inevitably what ends up happening is if you miss something, then it highlights that you're being biased or placing emphasis on one faith over another. So that's why I think we would want to get together to come to some collaborations on those places. And I think that would take time and discussion to do that properly. So I'm going to pause there before we go to the teaching learning update and solicit any questions you may have for my portion of the superintendent update this week.
Go ahead, Amy.
I just want to express my heartfelt gratitude about everything you just said on the calendar. It's making me emotional, because this is something that really resonates with me. And it might seem very simple, but just hearing the superintendent say that this is something that you're willing to spend time looking into, I think is really meaningful and worth the effort. It's a really complicated issue, and it's like, you know, it's a slippery slope, and I get all that, but it's important. So thank you. The other thing I wanted to bring up while we're talking about the calendar is that in regards to observing Juneteenth, I think the situation we find ourselves in this year, where the last day of school is on a Tuesday after a Monday holiday, it looks like it's going to happen. It has the potential to happen again next year. And if there's anything that we can do to plan ahead so that that doesn't happen, even if it means I'm hesitant to say it because I know how valued April vacation is, but I came from a district where they found themselves in a situation like this, and their solution was to take away days from April vacation if they got to a 5th snow day, so that school would end on a Friday. Yeah. I think that the calendar that has been published as a meeting material actually shows the last day of school with 5 snow days as June 23rd, but it would actually be June 26th.
It would be June 26th, yes.
Yeah, and it's saying June 23rd. So that's an error on the calendar that would need to be.
Okay, we'll put that.
But that is a Monday. And so I'm just putting that out there. I don't know if it's too late to deal with it.
If I may respond, Madam Chair. Those are tricky situations. Ms. Cohen, I can tell you recouping days during vacation weeks is also very tricky, because what you fall into is a scenario where your last snow day might be the end of March. And then if you change it and then you fall into that scenario and change your April vacation, well, people have already purchased their tickets to Vail or the Bahamas or wherever it may be. And then we end up having some backlash on that end. That frankly can be, I think, much more difficult to handle. I know there's some systems that have done some things like that, but that could be tricky. I think it's something that we'll have to study and look at. But this is going to be a reality every year going forward, because Juneteenth is a federal holiday that honors our nation. So we're just going to have to see how things fall from year to year.
Absolutely. And I was thinking it would be part of a longer conversation, but it also might be, as part of that conversation, might mean starting day, school day earlier, or, there's got to be a creative solution in there. But thank you anyway for considering it.
Thank you.
Just for the public's benefit, noting that the school days are tied into the contract too. And so we would need to consider that in the bigger scope as well. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I would like to back up for a minute. And I would like to ask Superintendent Downing, in the CBA, the contract, are each of the paid holidays listed independently, or do we say federal holidays that occur during school days?
They are listed independently, Mr. Rubenstein.
Well, then wouldn't compensation for Juneteenth be something that has to be negotiated, or has it already been negotiated?
Yes, that is something that's already been negotiated. So we were able to do that in the form of just a side letter, Mr. Rubenstein. And the pickle that we ran into ourselves with, particularly with our Unit A and Unit C employees that are 12-month employees, is that because it's a federal holiday, they're not required to work. So they would be getting an automatic paid holiday added on to their year, which put their Unit C 10-month colleagues then in a position that was not equitable. I know that these are moves that the town of Stow and the town of Bolton have also made to ensure that that's recognized for their employees.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sharon.
I'm just looking for clarification about the recommendations for the calendar. So are you recommending that the calendar, the naming of the federally recognized holidays stay as holidays on our current calendar? Or are you recommending, as Deirdre has asked, that those federally recognized holidays be named? So name Martin Luther King Day, Veterans Day, name Juneteenth, Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm not clear what you were suggesting.
I am recommending we name the holidays.
Okay.
With the two adjustments to that to try to be equitable and to properly honor those days. The two adjustments would be October 10th have a dual recognition of Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, and with the Christmas holiday recognized under the list of other holidays and other faith traditions that are also on our calendar.
Okay. And then,
so, and I think that would be something to take up, not tonight for a vote. I think it deserves some digestion, but we could bring it back to the committee next week. But I think to a deeper point, I think we need to drill down deep with our faith leaders and the Dear Jay committee next year to do some work into this and build some community connections and some common cross-faith conversations so that we don't feel like our faiths are in competition with each other. Because I did receive some emails through the course of this year when if I was recognizing one faith holiday or faith tradition or day of reverence, that if another wasn't recognized, some people held the position that there wasn't fair representation, which is why I think it's important to bring in faith leaders together on this, to have those cross conversations, to build empathy and understanding across faiths, and recognize we have these recognitions because we appreciate diversity in our community, particularly diversity of faith.
May I follow up?
Of course.
So what you're recommending is two steps. One step is on this coming up school year calendar, naming those federal holidays, and then a second step being exploring which additional holidays, faith holidays, would be somehow represented.
That's right. So okay. in my report, Ms. Poch, that's why the second piece I separated out into a different paragraph to illustrate. That's like conversations, next steps for next year, and I'll work closely with Dear Jay and Ms. Poch. I would really appreciate your partnership in helping and facilitating that, as well as our representative to Dear Jay.
I would be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Kirk, would you like us to take up a motion to amend the calendar for primary day now?
Well, that's my recommendation, Madam Chair, but as you know, I don't have the power to do such a thing, so I will leave that to you.
All right, but now's the time. So Mike,
now's the time.
Can I turn to you, Mr. Horesh, with the motion regarding primary day on the calendar and that revision?
Sure, I will move to approve the amendment to the 2022-2023 school year calendar to allow for September 6th, 2022 to be a no school day for the primary election day, adding one day to the end of the school year.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Rich. Any discussion? All right, we'll take the roll. Myself, yes. Joe?
Yes.
Amy Vessels?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Steve? I lost Steve. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
All right. So go ahead, Sharon.
So forgive me if I'm being out of order here with the Roberts rules and all that, but I'm thinking about this other calendar change, and I'm wondering if it might be worth just doing all of the change tonight. We have the recommendation from Dear Jay. That was dated May 11th, so we've had it for quite some time. It's not what Kirk is recommending is in line with that information that Dear Jay sent us. So I'm wondering if we can just move that forward tonight too and make all of those calendar changes at the same time.
To build on that, I wonder, Kirk, do you think we even need a vote on changing those labels?
I don't know if you necessarily need a vote, but I do think a vote is a statement by the committee of what we value. And it's taking the recommendations from our community, digesting those, thinking about those to make that communication. So I do think it is important for our committee to take a vote on the recommendation I put in front of you.
Okay. Amy.
I'm willing to make a motion in that regard.
Before you do that, I wonder, does anybody have any objection moving forward on approving that recommendation from the superintendent?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I'm not objecting to the motion. I'm just objecting to the protocol. This was under the superintendent's update. And again, from a notice perspective, I wasn't expecting that there would be a vote taken on this tonight. So again, it's the will of the committee if they want to do it. But from a practical standpoint, my inclination would be to follow the superintendent's recommendation and put it over for our next meeting. I think we'll have a next meeting next week. So
yep.
I don't see where it would be harmed to wait 7 days to vote on this.
Is that okay, Sharon?
Well,
to just hang on until the next meeting?
I think Amy had something that she wanted to say.
Go ahead, Amy.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I'm looking at the agenda and it says calendar revision under superintendent's update. So, I mean, and this was part of the meeting materials. I'd be okay with taking a vote tonight, but I feel like it's been out there for a while.
I think it's been out there for a while too, but I think to Joe's point, we try to allow the community time to recognize that a vote is to be taken on labeling the calendar in this way. I would actually be okay with waiting until our next meeting because it is not far from now, and labeling it would not take our human resources department so much labor to redo at a later date. I would appreciate it if we could wait until next time. Yeah, go ahead, Sharon.
I'm okay with waiting until next time, but I do think that it needs to be a priority that it happens next time, because this information was first put forward by DRJ months ago. And then it sat on the back burner for quite some time, and they were very patient in waiting for it to come forward again. And was expecting it to come forward a few weeks ago. And the date of the recommendation that they sent was May 11th. So now it's been another 3 or so weeks since then. So it feels like this is a request that's been out there for quite some time, and the committee, for whatever reason, has chosen not to make it a priority and take action on it. So I would like to then, if we wait 1 more week, that's okay, but it needs to be a priority for next time, please.
I hear you. Yeah, and I think that at the meeting on May 18th, it was literally like just a mistake, an omission error, that this didn't get onto the calendar to give forewarning. And so it had to wait till the 1st to give forewarning, and now we'll wait to the 15th until we vote. But it will be top of the agenda, I promise.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. Let's move on to our next piece of the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have 3 guests with us here tonight, and we will begin. We have Dr. McGuire, we have Ms. DeAngelis, and we have Ms. Riel Gubecki with us. So we'll start with Dr. McGuire for the teaching and learning report.
Great, thank you. Just 3 quick items as we kind of begin winding up the year here in the teaching and learning department. As I mentioned at a previous meeting, we have been in the process of planning for our annual summer academy for NRSD staff. That has been planned. The flyer went out for that last Friday to all of faculty and staff in the district. That will take place on June 22nd to the 24th, directly after students finish. We're going to be offering a variety of options for teachers and staff through Massachusetts Partnerships for Youth, MATSOL, as well as English Sheltered Immersion. In addition, teachers will also be working on curriculum writing and mapping in preparation for next year during our summer academy. In regards to the Renaissance Learning Platform, you've heard Superintendent Downing and myself talk about this new student assessment learning platform that we've been rolling out this year. We started the pilot of it in Lancaster at MRE in Luther Burbank earlier this fall. And we're excited to roll it out this spring to provide us with an assessment platform to track all students and their academic progress throughout the district each and every year. We had over 30 faculty and staff participate in a training on May 20th, and we'll now have those individuals train other faculty in the implementation of our new math and English and literacy assessments. We'll be piloting this by year's end to ensure that we are ready to go in the fall with this new large undertaking around student assessment. So we're really excited about that. And then just in regards to the May 20th early release, which was our last early release of the year, Friday, May 20th was an early release and the final one for the district, where teachers and staff participated in transitions meetings in preparation for next year. This is an annual tradition that we partake in through the Teaching and Learning Department, where all over the district, teachers and staff are meeting to discuss student movement into the next school year, utilizing guiding questions and protocols that we come up with to inform next steps in curriculum planning, social emotional learning for students, and then student placements for next year. In addition to that, the high school participated in visioning work with Dr. Frank Locker, who's our educational visioning planner associated with the new high school project. And kudos to the high school, as well as many students who also volunteered their time to stay late and participate in this training and visioning session with Dr. Locker. So it was a very busy and productive day in Neshoba on Friday, May 20th. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. DeAngelis, unless there are any questions. Great. Thanks, everybody.
Did we lose Joan, or did I lose Joan?
I see Joan on my screen. I'd like to introduce Joan DeAngelis as our Director of People Personnel Services. So thank you, Joan. There you are. I can't hear your voice, but your screen did just come on.
I think she was frozen for a bit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Did you not hear me?
There it is. Got you
now. There you go. Now we hear you, Joan.
I apologize. Thanks for having me tonight. I don't know why I have unstable internet because the weather is good here. So I wanted to let you know that the center school has achieved a new 5-year term of accreditation by the National Association for the Education of Young Children, known as NEAC. There are 10 program standards that the preschool needs to achieve. There are 294 overall items that are scored, and the district received a 94.56 pass rate. And the required items is we need to meet 80% pass rate for the overall program, a 60% pass rate in each of the standards, and a 70% pass in each of the assessed classes. So this is good news that we continue to have that accreditation for both our kindergarten and preschool. This is an accreditation that the superintendent and I have continue to talk about. Is this something we want to continue down this path and gain this? Because as you know, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed has a self-evaluation process. So we do follow their standards. So as we assess going through this process, we probably will be coming forward around some recommendations for that. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that accreditation. No, okay. So the next item is really about the integrated preschool. This year, we have had, I think a lot of this has to do with the pandemic. We've had a lot of referrals to the preschool that were delayed. And I think that would be something that would be expected. I am concerned about next year that given the numbers and the projections that I'm looking at right now, that we will not have enough preschool classes to service all our students. So after looking at the data and the number of slots that we'll have open next year, I am recommending an additional 3-day preschool program open in the afternoon at Center School. Center School's 3-day morning classroom is already full. So given the EI numbers and the increase in percentage, I think it would behoove us to open an additional classroom for next year. As you know, we had reorganized the preschool about 5 years ago and consolidated and really defined our programs for 3- and 5-day programs. And we haven't added any classrooms, and we've been able to accommodate all students, but I really am concerned about the next fall.
All right. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I want to thank Ms. DeAngelis. She's been very supportive recently as we're working on our MSBA work, because as you see, as we have more demands and needs for preschool, we're going to need more spaces as well. And so as we've talked about the learning pathways at the high school, I want to just take this moment as an opportune moment to say we are talking about adding additional preschool spaces in the future, but not until the construction of the high school is made. And we can do that in conjunction with an early childhood education program for our high school students that could be one of those certification pathways. So as Ms. DeAngelis brought to you today, the need to add an additional program, it illustrates what the important need of having preschool. And we have a considerable wait list for families of future students, preschool students who are not on IEPs, but would like to attend preschool in the Neshoba schools. So both the demands for receiving services and the demands for those who aren't receiving services are telling us we need to be thinking about our preschool issue in the future, because it will only grow and it can actually be a great benefit to us ultimately in educational programming at the new high school. So I just wanted to use this moment to emphasize that point. So thank you, Ms. DeAngelis, for your help there.
Kirk, so if we are in need of an additional, seems like maybe a 0.5 position, what's the budget impact there?
So Ms. DeAngelis, what is the budget impact of adding the afternoon 3-day session?
I think it would be a 0.3 position. So we have someone at 0.5 now, and we'd be looking to add 0.3 to add to that afternoon program. That's what we have in Bolton right now, is a 0.8.
So what I would add on to that, Ms. Vivirito, if you recall way back during workshop time and sprinkled throughout the spring, we know that the Mary Rowlandson kindergarten is coming in at 3 sections, and we have budgeted for 4 because they're still sort of 60 mark. Mr. O'Shea is feeling confident that that's going to be the case. So, but we're holding that sort of in abeyance right now for situations like Ms. DeAngelis just described. So it may not be that we need to come to the committee for any additional staffing at all, but we are going to wait a little bit to measure if there's any enrollment changes we would anticipate in Lancaster kindergarten.
Okay, thank you. To our health update, I think.
Yes, Ms. Gilbecki is here to update us on some changes to state testing programs.
Yes, well, thank you for having me as always. I appreciate the time. So for the remainder of the year, DESE and DPH have notified us that we have enough services from CIC Health, which is the state-run program that takes care of our consents and portal of how we navigate and put our results in for negative and positive tests for the state results of pool testing as well as symptomatic testing. We'll continue to the end of this year, meaning June. Come the summer program, however, we will only have access to the at-home tests that we currently now send out every other week to families that have 2 test kits within each kit. So we will be able to utilize those during the summer program. Bionex now, they're going to expire and we will no longer be able to use them. We will get halfway through the summer with those programs at this point. Come the fall, the recommendations at this point, as we all know during this pandemic, it has changed. Sometimes daily it feels like, and sometimes within weeks. So currently they will not be supporting any school districts with any type of testing, whether it be pool testing, at-home tests going home, or symptomatic testing, as well as the CIC Health, which is the portal that we utilize, and the services. They have employees right now currently in our schools that are helping us with the pool testing. So that will no longer be available to us. However, there's some suggestions that if a district wanted to purchase some of those programs, they may potentially be available, and it's still they're continuing to go back and forth. So that's what we're looking at for right now. So what we have done as a district is we have secured enough test kits to get us through the end of the year, as well as the ESY summer program for our students and community. So we'll still be sending those kits out to families as well. We've also a little overstocked coming into the fall based on maybe what we can utilize at that point. However, the expiration dates on some of these test kits, we're still unsure of where that's going to land us at. They extend, the FDA has extended some of those expiration test kits, and we'll know more come the summertime.
I would like to add on to that, Madam Chair, that we're going to be running this information in the Friday update to the community, my weekly update, so that we're signaling to them that the state testing programs are coming to an end. This is also a place that we're clearly getting the signal both federally and at the state level that point of care service like testing in schools is something that is going to be fading away. Much like if somebody has strep throat or they develop flu-like symptoms at school, they come down to the nurse's office, we advise them to go to their physician right away and get tests for those types of things. That's where we're moving to. And we're getting those signals from our state and federal leaders as well. So this is the messaging opportunity to begin preparing our community for those moments.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I was just curious. I just jumped on the data dashboard because I wanted to ask about if you're finding that the participation in the testing in school has been dropping. I'm speaking as a mom of a kid who I know keeps forgetting to go. So I know it's dropping by at least one. So, but I notice it actually isn't being updated since the beginning of April, unless I'm missing something. So is that just something we're not tracking anymore on the dashboard?
I'm going to ask the question, meaning the positive cases or the ones that
I know what the page that she's speaking of, Ms. Gobecki, because that is my responsibility. That page is mine, not yours.
Oh.
But yes, so Ms. Devine, you just learned that we have about 4 people that have their fingers in the data dashboard. We each have an assigned page, and that's my assigned page that I get from one of our nurses that works in the pool testing set. But yes, we aren't posting that data anymore. It wasn't being utilized or talked about in that in ways that was leveraging or lifting our conversation.
And I guess I'm just curious, are you finding that less students that can, parents consented, that less and less are going and getting that test every week, as is happening in my house?
It does. If I can just answer some of that, it does change based on the schools, because if you have tested positive, we would not test that student or staff member for another 90 days. So when you see an increase in cases, you're going to see a decrease in the testing in the schools, right? Makes sense. However, some schools we've seen an increase come in because now the ones that have had the increase over the December or February school vacation breaks, and they're past that 90 days, we're now testing more in those schools. So it does fluctuate back and forth.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I see no more golden hands. So thank you very much, Lisa, for that. Thank you, Joan.
We'll see you guys tomorrow.
And thank you, Todd. Yeah, thanks, Kirk. So moving on from the superintendent's update, we're going to head over to new business. And as you guys can see, we have a first reading of some harassment policy changes that might seem a bit overwhelming. We were certainly, as a policy subcommittee, very overwhelmed when we saw the documentation come through. Karen, I turn to you as the chair of the policy subcommittee to kind of help us understand this. And as a reminder, guys, this is the first reading, so it's your opportunity to provide to us any feedback that you might have to get us ready for the second reading at the next meeting.
Sure. So yeah, there were actually 4 different policies that came through on harassment. So the first one is policy AC. That is a policy we already have in our policy handbook. So we do have the red line version and then the final version of that policy. AC is really covers the commitment statements of the district around the issue of harassment. Just open it up here. Yeah, it's pretty general. It's a series of what the statements that what the school committee commits to on this topic. So that we do have the red line and the final version of that one. Do you want me to like go through all of them, Leah, or give people a minute?
Why don't you go through all of them and then we can take questions.
Okay. The next one is policy ACR. That really covers the definitions of harassment, discrimination, and sexual harassment. That is a new policy, so we don't have a red line version. This is the version that was given to us from MASC. And the same is also true for policy JICK. That is also new. That really covers harassment of students, like employee to student and student to student harassment. And then the final one is policy ACAB. That is in our handbook, but this version is vastly different. So to do a red line of it would have been pretty challenging. So, and in hindsight, I should have put what ours is and what MASC presented, but it is in our already listed in on our website. So that's what, and ACAB really covers sexual harassment and goes through due process and record keeping.
So Karen, at this point, any notes that you want to take to that anybody has an issue or wants to identify things that they think might need to be reconsidered?
Sure.
I'll take hands if anybody has anything to say. I see Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I will give fair warning to you, Madam Chair, and to Chair Devine. You can commence with the eye rolling right now, but this is not, there's nothing substantive about the policies that I'm going to comment upon. It's just a styling issue. And I noted in my reading of those policies that throughout the 4 or 5 policies that are presented, we kind of are all over the board. We're the Neshoba Public Schools, we're the Neshoba Public School District, we're the Neshoba Public, whatever. I think that, you know, just from a stylist standpoint, that what we are, I believe, according to the regional school agreement, is we are the Neshoba Regional School District, and our policy should reflect that accordingly. So again, it's just a styling issue. When I see the Neshoba Public School, they said, we're not really the Neshoba Public Schools. We have the Neshoba Regional School District. And it says that in some of the policies and some of it doesn't. So I just say that as a recommendation, throw it out there for your consideration, go to your subcommittee meeting, roll your eyes at my recommendations and do whatever you want at that point.
We never, ever roll our eyes at you. We are grateful. So that's a great recommendation. Thanks, Joe. Anything else anybody wants to throw out there? All right. So policy will reconsider that one little piece. Feels like just maybe an editing issue, but nothing really substantive. So yeah, Amy.
I did have one question about violations of the policy. It says what is considered violations of the policy, but not the consequences of violating the policy. And
can you point us to where you are, Amy?
Yeah, I'm on page 2 of file AC final version. I think this is one where we state our commitment to the community. On page 2, it says, it shall be a violation of this policy for any member of the school committee to engage in any form of discrimination, and then on and on and on. But I just didn't know whether we need to, how does it work if you violate a policy? Is that something that is specified in the policy, or is that a procedural issue, or like?
Yeah, so Kirk, do you want to weigh in, or maybe even Dr. Boynton if she feels comfortable, right? How does discipline shake out if and when there's a violation?
Yeah, we do have our, when it's in terms of students, we have our school code of conducts and our discipline policies and procedures around those measures. And then we also have that procedurally in terms of employees in the school system as well. You know, progressive discipline measures is an example of that. Stating specifically what the penalty would be in the policy, I think would be an overreach, because you then can't contextualize the situation and take the read of the events, the evidence, the facts of the situation that happened.
Okay. All right, everyone. So we're going to move on to our next matter in new business, and that is our high school student handbook review. And I'll turn it over to you, Kirk and Kate.
Thank you. I hit my mute too soon. Back on again. Yes, I'd like to bring Dr. Bolton, our high school principal, back to the table to talk to you about the update to the handbook. Dr. Bolton.
Thank you, Superintendent Downing. Thanks, everyone. So the high school handbook, hopefully you have the change memo. The handbook has not been updated for several years. And so this year, our school council began a review process of the handbook, and we're committed to doing this really for the next 2 years or so, kind of a deep dive in. So there were no major policy recommendation changes or anything like that at all. The handbook got a facelift with a layout and formatting change, revised section titles, and a reorg. So content seemed to have just been added with no sense to where it should live in the handbook. So looking thematically at where content should live, it was rearranged into sections for improved organization and readability. Hyperlinked table of contents was created in the Google Doc that I think transferred hopefully to the PDF. It'll be linked in multiple forms on the website as well. The welcome message was revised actually to be more welcoming and less prescriptive. Like to include the district school calendar, so the one that ultimately gets approved by the school committee. There's a placeholder in there of the one prior to the day after Labor Day being adopted. So the calendar will be updated, and we included a hyperlink of the rotation day. One major change that's more a practice is our protocols for communication to provide improved guidelines about, really for families, information about who to contact when there is a question or concern about the school. The school council group felt very strongly about including graduation credit requirements as well as the grade scale, not only in the program of studies, but also in the handbook for increased communication. Small change in library hours, language in the technology section from distractables, which was unclear to folks what that meant, to personal electronic devices. In the appendix, the school to career business partnership, that has not existed for a while, so that was removed. And then I had a great team, including a shout out to Ava Wyman, 9th grader, for edits and grammar. Ava was amazing, probably close to 100 grammar and spelling edits Ava made. And let's see, safety and security section had an incomplete introduction that was updated, had some input from Stacy Dupuis regarding the language in the health section, food and instruction about allergies. And then we're going to continue to review the handbook for any formatting, spelling, grammar. I have wonderful staff and students on the committee and parents who will, look for a little small, like extra space here and there. And then again, the school council is committed to taking a deep dive over the next couple of years. So we'll be coming to you repeatedly with additional recommendations. Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks.
And it was unanimously approved last Thursday.
Great. Go ahead, Amy Vessels.
Yes, the section I appreciate that you have the rotating schedule in there. Are you also adding in the schedule for a snow day as well as the schedule for a late start day? Because I know in my household, when we first started, we were very confused about that. So I know I would have liked that information.
I can include that as well. And I tried to include a full rotation, but that's really the complications of the Bell schedule is a full 16 days. So what I can do is include, here are the period lengths for a snow day, an early release, so absolutely. And if with the will of the committee, if that's something that I could add in with the help of my secretary, Marcia Winter, I would happily do that to show those. This is what a 1 hour delay would look like. Here's a 2 hour delay. Here's a late start and early release period schedule.
Thank you.
Great. Kurt, can you clarify for the committee what action you are looking for from us?
Yeah, the committee would vote approval of the handbook as presented with the changes noted from the memo.
All right, any other?
I think the vote would happen next week or the next meeting. I think this was not, am I right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's right, Kate, yeah.
And I know, so I just want to be aware that there's information in there that's not 100% accurate, and we're aware of that. We just want to make sure as a committee with school council that we are looking in, we're doing our research, we're finding the accurate information. So policy wise, I think we're up to date, but there's some practice pieces of information that, definitely still, those are some of the first easier things that we would be tackling even as early as September.
Got it. Go ahead, Joe.
So, Dr. Boynton, I'll give you the same warning. You can commence with the eye rolling with this particular comment as well. I just happen to be looking at the translation assistance page. And again, it's a small, but I think significant point. The English and Spanish seem to be the same, but the Portuguese is different. You talk about assistance or translation in regards to a language other than English, and it says that both in the English and in the Spanish one. But it's left out of the Portuguese. So I suppose most people of Portuguese persuasion or Brazilian persuasion will be able to understand that. But the translation from the English to Portuguese is different than the English to Spanish. It just doesn't say, it says, I think it has a language or a language different than English. So you can eye roll if you want. But
I'm not eye rolling. Thank you for that. I think attention to detail and making sure we're consistent is really important. And that's a piece that, again, there was a lot of me sliding things over from the Word doc. And so that was, a piece that was inherited that I think, I appreciate that because we need to make sure that our language is consistent.
If it's any consolation, it is translated correctly from the syntax.
That's good. I had nothing to do with that, but I'll make sure that gets amended. And if there are any other languages that that the committee feels should be added, I'm open to that. I know Spanish and Portuguese are our main ones, but happy to include more.
Great, thanks. Go ahead, Amy Cohen.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Dr. Boynton for taking the time to go through this and make all these changes. I think what you've done is really needed and did a great job. I actually was really curious to go through this and see what had changed. And I have just a few comments. One of them had to do with the number of minimum credits. It shows up in more than one place in the document. And I recall maybe a year or two ago, this came before the school committee and we made a change to this to reflect, I think 23 credits was the minimum number required per year, but somewhere in this document, I wrote it down as page 12. Let me see if that's
Amy,
right.
if you found one that says 25, let me know because it should say 23. I do believe that the school committee did vote, this was prior to my arrival at Neshoba, to reduce the number of credits for students to be considered full-time and fully enrolled from 25 to 23. And that appears and we tried, I did VLOOKUP and everything, but if I missed one, let me know.
I found it. It's on page 11. And
okay.
It still says 25 credits per year. Okay. And that is the kind of thing as a parent, when you're going through and you have an incoming freshman and you're trying to figure out, what courses do they need to take? And then you see an inconsistency.
Yep. I will say that 23 credits fully enrolled every year doesn't give a lot of cushion for, just as we're seeing it play out, it doesn't give a lot of cushion at all for any if a student has a bad semester or a challenging year, they may not earn enough credits to graduate. And so we're seeing that play out, and that's not for discussion today, but that may be one thing that I may come to the committee to talk about as we're seeing the reduction of from 25 to 23 play out in real time with our students, and looking at that unintended impact of that. And we have data from, I don't know, I don't recall when the vote was, but I think it might have been maybe not last school year, but the year before. And so looking at data from a couple of years to see where we are with that. So I'm not ready to prepare, but we're just gathering data around that decision. But I will make that change because it's currently at 23. So page 12?
11.
11. 11.
Okay, 11. Yeah. You got it.
And then the other thing I was wondering if there had been any discussion with your student, not your student council, your school council, was regarding the policy for makeup work due to an excused absence. When I was going through the meeting materials for the calendar revisions and looking at Dear J's recommendations, I feel like the handbook works together with the calendar, you know, and the calendar should reference the handbook should reference the calendar. And I was really happy that you incorporated the calendar into the handbook because it's a logical place for people to look for it. But there's some language in this handbook as it's written now that talks about students who miss a previously scheduled test or exam should make it up on the day they return. And I feel like this is an area that could be explored further to parse out, you know, that we should first be asking our teachers and staff to look at the calendar that's included in the handbook and try to avoid scheduling tests and exams and other events on those days. But if there happens to be a conflict, I'd like to, I guess I'm requesting if the school council could review that language to see if we can add some flexibility for students who find themselves in that situation.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, and yes, so that's through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the lens through which we're going to be looking at the handbook and examining. And I think bringing recommendations such as the one that you brought up forward to staff to discuss, as well, bring it forward to students to hear student voice through our student council and student class representatives, and then school committee as well. And perhaps worthwhile to have Dear Jay, weigh in a consulting fashion if the committee seems that, deems it appropriate to do so. But I think really the lens through which that we'll be looking, one of the lenses that we'll be looking at our handbook is that diversity, equity, and inclusion lens.
Yeah, that's
at
great.
Our practices and policies, and policy obviously set by school committee, but you're currently, undergoing that work, which is great.
Yeah. So that the statement that I found was on page 23. It's the last sentence there. So if I don't know if you have another meeting with your school council.
I don't. So that they approved and voted last week, and that's our last meeting of the year. Yeah. Our next scheduled meeting is actually at the night of the senior banquet. So that had to be canceled. So we scheduled another meeting in May in order to vote, but we're taking this on, as our project for the next year, probably two, based on my past experience. Looking at handbooks, it really does take a very methodical, thorough look and collaborative process. It's an iterative process where we will take sections at a time and propose some revised language, bring it to staff to review and weigh in for feedback, bring it to students, bring it to school committee. So it's a very methodical process. And again, one through the diversity, equity, and inclusion lens.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, great. So we will be bringing that forward for approval at the next meeting. Thank you, Dr. Boynton, for all of that good work.
Thanks, everyone.
So we're going to move on next to the Communication Subcommittee recommendation item in new business. And I'm going to turn it over to our chairperson of the Communication Subcommittee, Ms. Amy Cohen. Just keeping our eye, by the way, on the clock, guys, that in 4 minutes, we technically have to approve the meeting to continue. And we do have some very important agenda items still to go. So Amy, I'm not rushing you at all because I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say, but we do need to be mindful of the clock. So let's get going.
Okay. So what the Communication Subcommittee has brought to the school committee tonight is an annual report that we are hoping will serve as a model for other subcommittees that the school committee has. And if I back up a minute, each of our subcommittees at the beginning of the school year, we set goals for ourselves. For the Communication Subcommittee, those goals served as kind of our map or, for the school year of what we wanted to achieve. And we set our agendas according to those goals. One of the last goal that we set for ourselves was to consistently bring recommendations on communication best practices to the full school committee. And this report serves as our mechanism for bringing our recommendations to the school committee. So you can see that, I don't know if you'd like me to share my screen. Would that be best? Or
Sure.
Okay, let me share away. I can get my mouse over there. Are you all seeing that? Let me zoom in.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, so this report that we prepared is 1 page. It starts off by just stating our goals for the year. And what I've done in red here is provided a very simple update on where we landed with each goal. So the first goal that we set for ourselves was District 101 topics to broaden access information, and that ended up in our parking lot, and I'll get to that next. I'm not going to go through each one of these one by one because we kind of did that in our last meeting, but what I want to focus on is our recommendations for best communication practices. The first recommendation that our subcommittee spent a lot of time talking about was to provide notifications of our subcommittee and school committee agendas and meeting minutes to our constituents through use of a listserv. And we've kind of hit a dead end with this because we have no way of doing that as a school committee or as a subcommittee for that matter. So at this point, we're bringing it to the school committee for discussion with the hope that we could take a vote to accept or approve this as a recommendation so that we can give the superintendent some direction on figuring out a way for us to be able to do this. Our second recommendation is to create annual subcommittee reports, and as part of that report, create a parking lot for unfinished business. And the thought behind this was the annual reports would serve as a written record of the work that each subcommittee has done. They'd be posted as meeting materials, and it would really help for our constituents to understand some of the work that's going on behind the scenes. Would also help for future membership of each subcommittee to understand what each of the previous subcommittees has done. So we did create a parking lot, and I'll get to that next. Our third recommendation is to hold school committee trainings during public session. And this would primarily be to educate the community on our role. This is something that our chairperson instituted as a practice this year, and we thought it really worked well because the community gets a chance to observe us in these training sessions and can hear firsthand from the experts, what our purview and purpose is. achieve this communication goal. Middle school open houses. We realize the high school doesn't have an open, well, it has an open house, but doesn't necessarily include an opportunity for an introduction, but the high school orientation does. So we've kind of divided it up or specified it as such. And the reason would be so that we could very briefly be introduced and explain who, number one, who we are, and number two, what our roles and responsibilities are, and offer, if people unfinished business for a parking lot. These came from the goals that we set for ourselves that we weren't able to achieve this year. The first was to create alignment between our communication policies and the district strategic plan, specifically related to communication practices, and then support their implementation. And part of this is just a timing thing. Our strategic plan is coming together, and it didn't really make sense for us to work on this until that has been presented. And that won't happen until June 15th. But that would be a great thing for the next membership of the communication subcommittee to work on. The second item of our parking lot was to develop a list of District 101 topics. This is something we talked a lot about as a subcommittee, but just couldn't really find the time to make any headway on it because we spent so much time developing and issuing and then analyzing the survey that we sent out. The idea behind District 101 would be to just come up with a kind of like a short list of items that would, information that would be of use to parents, make sure that we're making that information easy for parents to find, and not just parents, community members. And then figure out where the best way, how to implement those topics, whether it's handbook, open houses, websites, or some other method. So with that, I will open it up to discussion. And, I guess my hope would be that we could have a vote to accept the recommendations of this committee. I think most of these have been presented throughout the year, and this is just a way to wrap them up.
All right, so thank you for that, Amy. Really appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Out of respect for the committee, I just want to do a very quick thumbs up, thumbs down. Can you give me a thumbs up if you are okay going over the time limit? It is now 9:04. Can we keep this meeting going? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay. So the thumbs up have it. So thank you, Amy, so much for that. Any clarifying questions or even probing questions for Amy on this?
Just well done.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just to add on what Amy was saying, this is supposed to serve as a template, not that any other subcommittee has to have an annual report, but the idea is to sort of sum up the calendar year and the year for each subcommittee with a report identifying the things that have been done, the things that have been tabled, recommendations, and parking lot. So it's just a way to provide continuity from one year to the next, seeing as how the composition of any given school committee and any given subcommittee is kind of turning over and is different from year to year. It provides a little bit of continuity.
Excuse me. All right, so that's good information. What I am sensing, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sensing that a lot of this is about school committee communication and not so much about the district communication. That is going to come through the strategic plan, and it's probably no surprise to you that that communication is going to be a part of the strategic plan. A lot of what I hear you talking about and recommending through your subcommittee, Amy, is ways that the school committee can better communicate with each other and with the communities that we serve. And so might I make a recommendation that we make this top of the agenda at our retreat this summer on building systems in our protocol conversation that look at and adhere to the recommendations that you guys have worked so hard to create? Do you think that would be an appropriate forum to do that?
I think so. I don't see why not. I don't know if the other members of the subcommittee have an opinion on that, but.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I mean, I do think that this warrants a deeper discussion. And, you know, given that it's now 9:07, I don't know that that deeper discussion is for tonight, but, you know, I feel like doing it at the retreat is still at the outset of the next school year and does give us a little bit of time to have a dialogue about these things, because frankly, there might be some pushback on the need to produce these things by each subcommittee. So I think we're going to have to sort of philosophically figure out whether this is a best practice or whether this is just extra work. But I do think that a deeper dive is warranted.
Yeah, I think that what we're basically talking about is school committee protocol and how we make progress and how we communicate and make sure that we're clarifying for the communities what we're doing. And that's like perfect work for our retreat. That's what the retreat is actually there for. So can we settle there, Amy, and make this like #1 agenda item for our retreat when we go to plan it?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I'm as long as we can spend some time during the workshop on this, I'll be satisfied. So
yeah. Can I get a thumbs up from people if they're feeling like that sounds like a good idea to work this into our protocols? I'm thinking that's good. I think this is going to be exciting. It's good stuff. I feel like we all also have enough experience in this room now where we're going to start saying like, oh, this is how we could do this better. And we're no longer feeling around in the dark anymore. So I think it's going to be a really great conversation. So thanks, Communication Subcommittee. It's a really awesome list you guys have there. All right. So Dan is with us still, I hope, for the student representative report. Dan, are you there?
I am. Thanks.
Awesome. Hi, Dan. Go right ahead.
Hello. All right. So for the student representative report, a lot been going on at the high school lately. We had the senior breakfast recently. It's the tradition where the seniors or the parents bring breakfast foods to celebrate the last day of school for seniors. So that said, the seniors are gone now. I did see a whole group of seniors come in to say goodbye to some teachers today, so that was nice to see. Among other events, we had the junior and senior proms. Senior prom was at the Westford Regency and the junior prom was at Mechanics Hall. And both of the events were great, I heard. I personally didn't go, but I heard it was great. So let's see, we have the boys lacrosse finals on Friday at 6 p.m. and a senior banquet on June 9th. We also have a new therapy dog apparently named Maui. I heard about that, so that's cool. I did not know that until recently. And we also have the spring fling dance for on June 10th for the freshmen and sophomores. We also have GSA celebrating Pride and Awareness. We had a day where they celebrated Pride and Awareness by teaching in the auditorium about like gender identities, the Stonewall riots, the Lavender Scare, and LGBTQ plus media. And teachers would bring their classes in to learn about it. I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't have any of my classes personally go, unfortunately, but I heard people who were talking about it, and I learned some of it from my friends. So I learned what was going on still. We also had class elections today, and I think I heard results were coming out tomorrow. We also have the closet care, the care closet in the media center, and there's supplies there for people to come and pick them up who don't have access to them. Among other things, we have the more students that were involved in the PD building work on May 20th with Frank Locker and the rest of the high school staff. So that was great. I think that's about it.
That is a lot. Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Very busy time of year for all of you guys. Any questions for Dan on the student report? All right. Dan, thanks again for hanging out with us. We so appreciate you keeping us up to date.
No
and
problem.
We hope we see you again. You're going to be at the next meeting, right? Yeah.
The next meeting? I can come to the next meeting.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. All right, guys, on to unfinished business. We have 3 votes that we're going to be taking tonight. The first one is Policy Manual D, second reading. I think this might be the 4th or 8th reading. I'm not sure. But we have the benefit of Mr. Gleason helping the policy subcommittee to kind of comb through this policy to make sure that there are no inconsistencies. And we so appreciate that, Joe. Thanks so much. Joe actually created a redlined version of all of the things that he helped to change, which had to have taken you forever. So again, thanks, Joe. Mike, I turn to you.
Would you just like me to make the motion then?
I would love that.
Madam Chairman, before you do that, and again, this is not necessarily an eye-rolling a moment, but there is one thing that I did want to point out, and I pointed it out at the subcommittee meeting, and I would actually like it if Ms. Masterson would include my comments that I'm about to make in the minutes. It pertains to the last policy in policy D, which is DKC, the expense reimbursements. Just so the committee members understand, the policy is the domain of the policy subcommittee. I didn't do anything other than go through policy D and just kind of clean it up and have all the language consistent throughout the document. But I did bring to the subcommittee's attention one substantive change that I made to policy DKC, which pertains to expense reimbursements. And I added in the school committee obligation to provide properly completed and approved vouchers for any expenses that we would incur should we attend the conferences and conventions and what have you. So I think it's good practice in any district. I know that, again, nobody wants to hear about my curriculum vitae, but in my former district, they had the ignominious reputation of not only once, but twice making it on the local news front page of the local newspaper for committee members who were attending the National School Board Association conference and convention, and using it as sort of a junket and going golfing and what have you, and on the taxpayers' dime. So I just added that in there. I just want that comment in the minutes. I don't know if anybody has objections to it, but I did want to point that out in case somebody thinks that I went in there and changed something without the policy subcommittee knowing about that.
Thanks, Joe. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'll move to approve the revisions to policy section D as presented, or should I say with the amendments, the proposed amendments.
I would just say as presented.
As presented, fair enough.
And I will second that. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will take the roll. I'm going to start with Brett first.
Yes.
Amy Cohen.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Rich.
Yes.
Sharon.
Yes.
Amy V.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Joe.
Yeah.
All right. Yes. Policy D is in the books, and Alita can forward that to MASC. Very exciting. That will go into our online manual. Thank you, Karen, too, for all of your work on that. It's never easy. Now we'll move on to our school lunch increase vote. And Mike, again, I'll turn to you for a motion.
I'll move to approve a 9% increase in the charge for school lunch. The price would increase 30 cents to $3.60.
I'll second that. And any discussion on this vote? Seeing none, I'll take the roll. And Mike, I'll start with you.
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Amy V?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Joe?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Amy C?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
And Rich?
Yes.
Excellent. Yay. Now we will move on, to our last item of unfinished business, and that's the School Resource Officer Memorandum of Understanding. And I will go to Mike for a motion.
Sure, I'll move to authorize the superintendent to sign the MOU for the School Resource Officer between the Neshoba Regional School District and the town of Bolton.
And I will second that motion. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll go to Amy Vessels.
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Joe?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Amy C?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
And Rich?
Yes.
All right. Good work there, people. We are going to move on to subcommittee reports, recognizing that we are a newly organized school committee and you don't necessarily have to have a report. You probably shouldn't have one. Although if there's something new and there's something ongoing, I would love to hear from you. So let's go down the list and you let me know if you have anything new to report. So I'll go to budget and warrant. Rich, anything new?
Our chair is on the call here, or at least he was, but
He was. I don't think, did I miss him?
I don't see him.
He's not here anymore.
Okay, I just wanted to be deferential. I'm the mere secretary. So we are having, this will be a report for both the audit advisory and budget warrant. So we're having a meeting on the 13th. I believe Ms. Maroney has scheduled the auditor, not one of the partners, but one of the consultants, who will present the draft audit. If not I guess we won't get the completed one until after the end of June, I believe. So we're going to be having a joint meeting between audit advisory and budget and warrant, since they overlap in responsibilities, and we are short one member on audit advisory, and depending on how the members are feeling, we may be short one member there too. So it's just good to cross-pollinate. So that'll be on the 13th.
Great. Thanks very much, Rich. Communication, do you have anything to add? All right. And the school building committee, Joe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, we had our last meeting on May 17th. We went over the preliminary building design concepts. Mr. Olson touched on those this evening. The next public forum, again, as Mr. Olson indicated, will be June 14th. And on the 21st will be our next full committee meeting, where we will be voting to make a recommendation to the district committee on the preliminary design program submission to the MSBA, which we will hopefully be taking on the 22nd. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Personnel has no report. I go to policy. And Karen.
We pretty much covered everything already. Nothing else to report.
Great. Audit advisory is good. Anything new for Dear Jay? Sharon?
I want to just give a shout out to all of the members of Dear Jay. Cheryl Breslin, Laurie Burnett, Charlene Cabral, Lindsay Chavez, Willis Christopher, Greg Denson, Kristen Hara, Kelly Lawler, and Courtney Philbin. They have worked, I can't even describe how many hours they have worked over the course of the last few months to really dig into the whole topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really understand what our district needs and move forward some recommendations. So they are unsung heroes, and I just want to give them a shout out tonight.
Great. Thanks so much, Sharon. Kudos to all of them. We really appreciate their work. And anything new from our CPAC?
Nothing to report.
Okie doke. So guys, I'm going to put a link in the chat. I'm also going to send this to you by email. This is a survey that you can complete now or later, preferably a little bit later, maybe right after the meeting, where you can review what all the committees are responsible for and identify which committees you prefer to sit on next year. And at the June 15th meeting, I will announce our new subcommittee compositions. Okie doke. Thumbs up on that one. You get some virtual affirmation here. All right, cool. So the agenda is pretty much set for the last two meetings here. The planning calendar. I don't know if you guys find it useful, but I can bring it up for us. Just bear with me here.
Madam Chair, I can tell you it's full.
It is full. There's absolutely no more room, everyone. So no, I'm just kidding. If you're seeing something that is missing, that is in error, please tell me. I know that one thing we want to do is vote on that calendar revision. That's something that we have committed to. So these are all of our 15th topics. All right, so I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand. Oh, Amy, go ahead, Amy.
Are the DRJ recommendations?
Yes. So that calendar revision will be our authorization of the DRJ recommendations. I think we got it all there. And then on the 22nd, we're just going to have that pop-up meeting, which is just going to be a 2-item agenda. And then we'll look toward the retreat. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And I think that's pretty much it, my friends. We have had a pretty long meeting. Mike?
Just to clarify, the school committee meeting on the 22nd, is it a 6:30 start?
Yes, unless an executive session pops up, which I doubt it will.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Yeah, cool. Amy?
I just really want to quickly thank you for doing such an excellent job leading the committee this year. I mean, truly, and having the form ready to select our subcommittees. I mean, you are just on top of it all. So we are really lucky to have you as our chairperson, and I'm looking forward to next year serving under you.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah.
I feel lucky to be with all of you, truly. What a great group we are. So I'm going to move to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I saw Sharon first. Let's take the roll. Joe?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Amy Vessels?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
And Brett?
Yes.
All right, everybody. Great work. See you next time.